Okay, you're on.
Hi, everyone. Good evening and welcome. My name is Dr. Lillian Au, and I'm a naturopathic doctor, lecturer for the Integrative Functional Medicine Fellowship Program, and one of the lead providers for the Pre-Pregnancy Whole Person Care Program at the UC Irvine Susan Samueli Integrative Health Institute. Thank you for joining us today during our free community lecture, Integrative Insider Live, where we share insights on integrative whole person health. This event is open to the public. All registrants will receive a follow-up email with a link to the recorded session. Our main clinic here on UC Irvine campus is designed to best empower you on your whole person health journey. We also offer integrative services at UCI Health sites in Newport Beach, near Fashion Island, Pacific Breast and Oncology Hematology at Pacific Medical Plaza in Costa Mesa, Yorba Linda, and Laguna Hills. Before we start, a few housekeeping items. We are recording this session, and all registrants will receive an email with the link to the recording. For those on Zoom, to minimize distractions, everyone will remain mute and video off. Please utilize the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen for any questions or to communicate with us during this session. After the presentation, I will moderate a Q&A session. For those in-person attendees, restrooms are located on the first floor in the main lobby. And now onto our main event. For many parents, the desire to feed and nourish our children is a fundamental parental instinct. But what happens when our children won't eat? Dr. Andrew Lee will explore common forms of picky eating at various stages of childhood and different therapies and techniques for addressing and preventing picky eating habits. Dr. Lee grew up in Southern California and attended Stanford University for his undergraduate studies. He earned his medical degree from Washington University in St. Louis School of Medicine before completing his pediatric residency training at Children's Hospital of Orange County. After spending time as a primary care pediatrician in the Seattle area and working at the Seattle Children's Hospital Urgent Care Emergency Department, he returned to Orange County and opened his own private pediatric practice in Irvine. He's excited to join the team at the UCI Susan Samueli Integrative Health Institute and bring more holistic care concepts to families with young children and teens. Dr. Lee loves working with parents and children to promote healthy lifestyle habits, prevent disease, and optimize family wellness. He's passionate about searching for the root cause of health issues and has pursued additional education and training in a range of areas, including classical 5-element acupuncture, acupressure, qigong, sleep disorder breathing related to craniofacial development, and attention mood behavior disorders in children. He believes that disease prevention is a keystone of integrative pediatric care, and that families can often benefit from several different modalities of care when pursuing optimal health and wellness. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Andrew Lee to Integrative Insider Live.
Thank you, Dr. Au. I'm so glad to be here. First, just to be part of the team at Samueli Integrative Health Institute, which is an amazing place. But also to talk about a very, one of my favorite topics, food and eating. I think it's actually very tied into what we do here. I think that many people realize that diet is very much tied into our health in many ways. And so hopefully today's presentation will be helpful for improving the health and the nutrition of children in our area. So, all right. Before we get started, I have no financial interest in any kind of products that you might see in this presentation to disclose. And our learning objectives today are going to be based on picky eating. So first we're going to talk about the factors that sort of go into creating and fostering picky eating habits. And then we're going to talk about some of the potential detrimental effects of picky eating, how it can actually affect a child's health. We will touch on some of the warning signs and the red flags in picky eaters that definitely would require further evaluation and further care, specialty care. And then we're going to talk about a few different strategies, both kind of like broad strategies as well as more practical techniques to help with picky eating and reduce picky eating habits. And I hope by the end of this that really my goal is to hopefully change or kind of help us rethink how we approach picky eating, how we think about this particular challenge or problem as parents. Okay, so first of all, what is picky eating? How do we define that? And really, there's no single concrete definition. I've actually read many different studies, looking at interventions for picky eating, reviewing different causes of picky eating, and most of them don't have a single definition that's agreed upon. Usually, it includes, there's a limited variety of foods that a child is consuming, or an inadequate variety of foods. And typically, picky eating also kind of includes reluctance or resistance to trying something that's new or unfamiliar. And that particular concept is called food neophobia. I like to say picky eating is basically just not eating what you should be eating. And if you look at the different studies out there trying to measure what the prevalence is, it really depends on how you assess, like what questionnaires or what other tools you use to assess picky eating. So some studies quote anywhere from 6 to 50% of children out there are considered picky eaters. Most studies do agree, though, that definitely the peak age for picky eating habits and challenges is the toddler age group, which is around 2 to 5 years old. And many sources kind of quote that picky eating often is outgrown or kind of tapers off later in adolescence and adulthood. Although I put a question mark there because sometimes I wonder if really it's that people are not picky, or it's just now socially acceptable. Sort of like if a toddler is refusing his veggies, then he's throwing a tantrum and throwing things all over the place and crying, and that's very unacceptable socially. It's hard for a parent to handle. But if a teenager just says, no, I don't want to eat that, or they just order something else, then it's how we treat that and how we view that is different. So I'm not sure if picky eating really is truly outgrown. But again, it depends on how you define things. Okay, so let's go into the factors that sometimes can be involved with picky eating. I say possible factors because every child's different, and rarely is it just one single factor. So there's a few different categories. There's developmental issues, there's medical disorders that can lead to picky eating habits, there's psychiatric and behavioral issues, and there's also sort of the environment of how the child's raised. So the social and economic, cultural environment can really influence eating habits and can sometimes promote picky eating habits. It's very important to note, though, that gender, race, and ethnicity and childhood weight are not really factors involved in picky eating. So there are picky boys and picky girls. There's picky eaters in every racial group. And there's picky eaters who are normal weight, overweight, and skinny and underweight. So those factors really are not involved with how we define picky eating and how it's caused. If we look further at some of the developmental factors, many of the textbooks on pediatric development and many of the studies really kind of talk about how toddler age is sort of a normal developmental stage when picky eating might be kind of normal in some sense. So they go from being an infant who's really, curious and wanting to explore things, touch everything, put everything in their mouth. They have no fear of consequences, no fear of cause and effect, to a toddler who's just starting to be a little bit more aware of things. So they still have that curiosity. They still want to put things in their mouth and grab everything. But they also have a little bit more awareness that sometimes you do things and it hurts or they don't like it. So, and probably the best example I can think of that's not picky eating is that as a pediatrician, I see children, babies and toddlers, and when they're infants, a lot of times they come to the office and they're happy and I see them. They don't remember me from last time if they got vaccines or anything, but a toddler usually starts to remember me. So they kind of like have that memory. They kind of know, they have an awareness of the setting. So they have caution basically. And I think that sometimes can lead to some picky eating type of behaviors. But beyond normal development, there's also abnormal development factors that can lead to picky eating. A big one is actually sensory disorders. So if a child is hypersensitive to texture, food texture in their mouth, or hypersensitive to smell, or maybe even just very sensitive to how things look and how they're presented, if it's too chaotic and messy, or if they have sensory processing disorder where overstimulation in certain settings is difficult for them to handle, then that can often lead to picky eating, where they develop sort of an abnormal relationship with eating and food. Motor coordination also can cause problems. So swallow coordination dysfunction, where a child is delayed in learning how to swallow. So sort of like if their motor coordination is delayed, but instead of the muscles used for walking or the muscles used for hand movements, it's the muscles used for swallowing, which are actually very complicated, intricate coordination there. If that is dysfunctional or delayed, then that can lead to difficulty handling certain types of foods, certain textures, or even if they take a bite that's too big, then and that can lead to choking, gagging type symptoms that a child will instinctively want to avoid and want to protect themselves against, and they may start to avoid certain types of food. And then children on the autism spectrum or other neurodivergent development disorders, they very frequently have picky eating, and that probably for these children there's a combination of some motor coordination for some of them, often some sensory issues, but probably some other issues as well that are apart from just sensory and motor. But it's a very frequent concern in children with autism. Other groups of factors, so medical disorders, and this really, I think these disorders really cause picky eating, but they are obviously beyond just simple, straightforward picky eating. So they tend to be issues with swallowing, issues with allergies or allergic reactions and sensitivities, or actual gastrointestinal issues with the stomach, and digestion, or issues with the intestines. So all of these listed disorders here can lead to picky eating habits as well. But in these cases, usually we need to address the medical issue before we can really try to make headway on correcting some picky eating habits. Psychiatric and behavioral issues. So again, there's sort of a mix of maybe normal things and then also some abnormal things. So some kids who have anxiety disorder, or actually what's becoming more recognized now is something called ARFID, which is avoidant restrictive food intake disorder. These children basically have very extreme aversion to eating, where it gets to a point where they are so limited in what they eat and how much they eat that they lose weight, or they have very severe nutrition deficiencies and require supplementation or sometimes even hospitalization. So definitely these type of mental health disorders are often very complex, but they can lead to picky eating, and sometimes they are started or there's sort of initial triggers that were sensory in nature or developmental in nature that eventually started to affect their mental health and affect anxiety levels and other fears of food and fears of vomiting and fears of choking. Then there's kind of normal things like the lack of child autonomy. Children at the toddler age especially, but even as they grow older, they are at various times, they often will feel like they have no control over what, when dinner is, what's served for dinner. And that lack of autonomy can be very frustrating for different age groups. But one thing that they do have control over is if they eat something. So it's sort of, in a way, it's like, it's one area, you can't force a child to actually eat and swallow something unless you put like a tube in or something like that. And then parental influence is something that is very normal to happen, but can lead to picky eating habits depending on the environment. So obviously children often pick up on parental eating habits, but then if there's a lot of parental pressure during meal times to eat, if there's a lot of encouragement or lack of encouragement to eat certain types of foods, if there's a lot of like parent-child conflict, that definitely can influence eating behavior as well. Okay, and then last is the environments that the child's growing up in, whether they have access to healthy foods, if they're very, very available for the family to buy, but also if they're available at home. If the family schedule is really difficult to have time to prepare healthy foods, cultural practices, and sort of what foods are emphasized. And then parent education level, and this can be both lower and higher education, sometimes will affect picky eating habits in general. So it's a lot of different things that can affect picky eating. So what can happen if a child is picky in their eating habits? Can it affect their health? And I would say that thankfully, unless they have some of the medical disorders that we mentioned before, there's actually many studies showing that a lot of picky eaters eventually don't have a lot of problems, but the picky eating can get to a point where it does affect some nutritional issues. So it can affect caloric intake, which will affect weight gain. And interestingly, this can cause too much calorie intake or too little, meaning too much weight gain or too little. And the way that happens would be a child who's very picky, so they only eat, bread and crackers and mac and cheese and juice. And they get maybe excess calories, but they're not getting a good variety and good nutrition in their diet. Whereas other picky eaters, they don't eat a lot, they refuse a lot of things, and so they may actually slow down in their weight gain. Certain foods that if like a child is very picky about eating meat, then it can lead to zinc or iron deficiency. They're picky about fruits and vegetables, and they can lead to deficiency of fiber and other micronutrients, antioxidants. If they're picky about dairy products, then they may lack a good source of calcium and vitamin D. And fiber deficiency in particular can be very harmful to a child's gut. It can cause slower transit time and constipation, which can lead to actually some quite severe problems. But also lack of fiber really creates a suboptimal gut environment, and so that gut environment is probably less resilient to disease and more prone to chronic problems as well as acute disease. And then picky eating can also have a lot of psychosocial impact. Just the conflict between parent and child being that alone, it can be a huge impact and really affect the family dynamic. Okay, so then we talked about this a little bit, but some of the symptoms that if you saw these symptoms on the left here in a picky eater, then those would kind of necessitate further evaluation. So if they seem to have swallowing difficulty, if they often choked and gagged on food, every time they drink or eat something, they kind of cough and sputter, or if they chew and then spit it out, or they chew and then they hold it in their cheeks like chipmunk cheeks, then that often suggests there's some swallowing difficulty, and they probably should see feeding swallow therapy if they're a younger child, or potentially ENT if there's some more severe dysfunction suspected. If a picky eater is losing weight, that's never normal. So that definitely needs to be evaluated either, probably first with a GI specialist, but then potentially, with psychiatry if we think it's anxiety or ARFID related, or a dietitian, or if we think it's food allergy related. Abdominal pain and abnormal stool, like blood in the stool, also should not be part of like symptoms of a sort of a straightforward picky eater. Food allergy symptoms like rashes, swelling, itchiness, cramping, vomiting, loose stools or diarrhea, all of these are sort of like food reactions. Those definitely should also be investigated as well. But because sometimes those symptoms make a child not want to eat certain foods. And then if there is just a picky eater and they're having very major, significant psychosocial problems, whether it's socially or more commonly at home, or if they have a lot of anxiety about eating now, then a lot of times extra help or counseling is recommended as well. Okay, and I just want to mention, so ARFID, which sort of wasn't on a lot of people's radar before, but it's gaining a lot more recognition now. So avoidant restrictive food intake disorder, again, it's sort of like where a child has such an intense aversion to eating or is so limited in what they will eat that they actually don't meet their nutritional needs and their energy needs. So they start to lose weight, or they stop gaining weight, or they have very severe nutrition deficiencies, or they need even like a G-tube, or they need oral nutrition supplements to kind of get them back to health. So we are starting to see more of this. In some ways, I think some of these kids start out with sensory or developmental issues, and then it just compounds over time and starts to, and mental health issues start to add into it. Okay, so let's talk about strategies to help reduce picky eating. And I guess the main thing here that I want to say is that the strategy is really mostly about changing ourselves, changing how we approach it, how we think about it, and not trying to change a child directly. Because if you try to change a child directly, it will not work. They will resist you and they will do the exact opposite. So the first strategy is really about changing your mindset, changing your approach. First of all, mealtime needs to be fun and very positive. We want a situation where the child can't wait for dinner time. They look forward to dinner. When dinner's ready, they're rushing to the table. Rather than you're dragging the child to the table, you're telling them they need to stay there and they need to finish that before they can leave. So we need to avoid negativity and pressure. We need to avoid micromanaging, because all of those create a very negative atmosphere for eating and make it so eating becomes homework, becomes a chore. And so no child and no person is going to enjoy that, actually. So first, we have to make mealtime very fun and positive, regardless of whether that child is still picky or not. Part of this is also about the language you use, your vocabulary, both in your mind and out loud. So you want to be praising good behavior, so instead of kind of saying, oh gosh, he's such a picky eater, I wish you would eat this. You want to be more like, oh, your mom is such an adventurous eater, or oh, I love how you like spicy food just like dad does, or or maybe it's like your stomach is like the Superman of stomachs. It's unstoppable. You can give it anything. Those are things that you want a child to hear to reinforce that positive behaviors, that trying new things, that having a good appetite, that enjoying food is a positive thing. So you want to sort of change your language and how you approach that. And you don't want to label a child a picky eater. You don't want to say out loud or in your own mind that, oh, my child is a picky eater. My son actually used to, when he was much younger, he didn't like seafood. So there was a time where we kind of always, whenever we went somewhere to a restaurant or something, or relatives get together, we'd go, oh, yeah, Russell doesn't eat fish. He doesn't like fish. Or we would go to a restaurant and be like, oh, we got to look and see what can Russell eat because he doesn't like fish. So we started to realize that we were kind of like making him self-identify as a non-fish eater. And so we stopped that language. We really stopped talking about it. Finally, we went out to eat sushi because his cousins love sushi. And so he started eating salmon sushi. And then from there, he ate some other sushi. And then he's tried cooked salmon. And so now he eats seafood, thankfully. But it just goes to show you that, like, we often will unconsciously, our language has a bigger influence than we realize, and sometimes we have to pay more attention to that because it will affect how they internalize, how they see themselves too, their self-identity in some ways. We also really want to avoid bribes and rewards. So you don't want to say, eat this and then you get dessert. Eat this and you can have ice cream. Eat this and I'll buy you a toy. Because then you're teaching your child that eating is the chore. Eating is the challenge. Eating is the homework. And then after you do this thing that's unpleasant, then you get a reward. We want the child to think that eating is what you enjoy. Eating is the reward itself. Okay, so even though in the short term, bribing a child, especially at a certain age, can work. They will swallow down the peas or the broccoli or whatever. It actually, in the long term, it reinforces that I don't like these foods, but I'll eat them if I get a reward. Okay, so once we move past the mindset and changing our approach, then we want to think about, like, okay, how can we create a culture at home or, the environment that the child is in that is very conducive to learning healthy eating habits and enjoying food. We need to first prioritize mealtime. Right now, you might think you prioritize mealtime, but I would argue that most modern families prioritize food and nutrition, but not mealtime culture. Meaning, yes, we make sure our kids eat and they get some nutrition, but we don't make sure we have a very pleasant mealtime experience where it's very fun and we're all together. I mean, I have 2 kids who are in high school now, so we rarely eat together. I think my son and my daughter probably eat together like a couple days a week because of their schedules and stuff. So it's modern lifestyle can often really deprioritize mealtime. And if we make that a protected, valuable family time, then that's going to go a long way to showing the child that, hey, eating and mealtime is kind of a sacred family time, And then when they're all together eating as a family, then we want to make sure that parents are modeling adventurous, healthy eating behaviors and really making it so the child realizes that, oh, trying new things, enjoying food, enjoying healthy food is like a core family value. That's like how we eat. That's how our family eats. And that really starts with parents as role models. So, just think about how many times have you eaten, a chocolate chip cookie or a cupcake or ice cream. You're like, oh, this is so good. And then how many times have you eaten the vegetable dish that you cooked in a rush after work, or some other thing that you cooked and been like, oh, this is so good, I was craving this. I feel like the way we're modeling food enjoyment is very skewed towards unhealthy foods, sugary foods, desserts, and things like that. So I think we need to, sort of look at how we are as role models. And then I think having some family customs and traditions can also really help too. So, for example, like if you're clinking your glasses together and saying cheers, you can do that with, like, everyone holds a little broccoli floret and we're like, cheers with the broccoli, and you take a big bite. And then that makes broccoli seem like, oh, this is like a fun family tradition thing, right? Or you can be feeding each other, it's like you you give mom a bite, and mom gives dad a bite, and dad gives, child a bite. So that also is kind of like a fun thing to make the mealtime just more connected and more bonding happening. And then dad tax or data tax, that's like, if my son or daughter gets ice cream, then they often have to pay a data tax. I get a bite. But what if we did that for, when you have this really beautiful salad, then, oh, can I have a bite of your salad? Or, if you have some other dish, I want a bite of that. Or, oh, give your mom a bite of this. She's going to love this. Or can I try a bite of that? So, trying to make those traditions apply to healthy foods as well. And then the mealtime style cannot, the more you involve everyone as if we're all together as like a team or we're working together, the better. So if it's sort of buffet style, then it's like we're all enjoying this food together. We have it in the center and we're kind of serving ourselves, but we can serve each other. Or you can even say like, oh, okay, Russell, can you give everyone a scoop of rice? And then Aubrey, that's my daughter's name is Aubrey. Can you give everyone, a piece of chicken, and then dad will give everyone a piece, some green beans or whatever. So all of that just creates this culture where it's like, we are all together, we all enjoy this, we're all eating the same. Okay, so then beyond that, this is beyond mealtime, for picky eaters, it often helps a lot if they experience food outside of the pressure of eating. So you want to basically build positive associations, positive memories of food, of interacting with food, but when they didn't have to eat it. So that's going to be like when you're shopping for groceries, you say like, oh, hey, can you help me pick some apples? We need 3 apples. And that's a great teaching moment because you say, okay, when you pick an apple, you want to make sure it's red, make sure there's no bruises, no soft spots. Make sure it's not abnormally shaped and looks funny, or maybe you like the funny one, you can have one funny one or something, So shopping, they could be washing the produce, helping put it away in the fridge, in the pantry. They can be helping to prep things, tearing into pieces, sorting things, helping to chop things. They can help with cooking, watching the stove, stirring things, mixing things. And then if you are like a super parent and you garden, then that would be great too. Because I think there's probably nothing more encouraging than watching something grow, watching a fruit or a vegetable grow on the vine or the tree or the bush, and then picking it when it's ripe, and then you get to enjoy it right there and just, see that whole miracle happen. So you want to use those opportunities to show them that food is really interesting and enjoyable, even when we don't have to eat it. And sometimes you can kind of, even comment like, oh, the tomatoes that Russell picked today were really good, actually. This is like super crunchy, juicy tomato, And then the last thing that I mentioned here is food playtime, sometimes called food school. This is actually a feeding therapy technique often used where they'll take like 3 to 5 food items that are different, but maybe they have a common theme. They're all crunchy things. They're all green things. They're all circular things. They're all sticky things. They're all shiny. And then the child just has an opportunity to play with it, explore it, crumble it up, try and put it together, mash it, or taste it if they want. And then if it's a younger child, you can often kind of like make it playful. You can say, okay, I'm going to try nibbling this like a little mouse, or I'm going to lick this like a little snake, like, a little quick lick with your tongue, or I'm going to take a big dinosaur bite of this, and so you try to, and if they don't want to taste it, that's fine. You want to have no stress, but only exploration and play. Okay, so as part of that, along with that, we also want to make sure that whenever possible, we're working with a child's innate tendencies or what a child naturally likes to do. So children naturally usually like finger foods and dipping things and foods where they don't have to use a spoon or a fork. If it's in fun shapes or convenient shapes, if it's a very colorful and nice presentation or fun presentation. A lot of kids love things in separate compartments, and then they get to open the compartments and then they get to put it together. So they like that. It's like a little organized and it's like put away, and then we can open things up. And then, you can also play with your food to some extent, hopefully not wasting too much food, but, making this green bean look like a mustache, or you can even just the way you refer to food, you reinforce some things that young kids really gravitate towards. Like, young kids love to reinforce that, yes, they know their shapes, they know their colors, they know this is big, this is small. Oh, this is what rabbits eat. This is what, this is what this animal eats. Things like that. Or this thing is shaped and it looks like a rocket ship. This looks like an airplane. So you want to work with those innate tendencies to make food interesting and fun. Okay, and basically I think you want to get to a point where you are doing positive, healthy brainwashing, okay? But I think of it like you're brainwashing in order to undo the bad brainwashing that they get from the commercial corporate food industry, right? So you're trying to brainwash to remove what has been done by McDonald's commercials, Coca-Cola, Cheetos, Carl's Jr., all of these things, right? Gatorade. You're trying to do healthy brainwashing, okay? Or resetting how they think about food, and so that they think about healthy foods in a positive way. And that starts with how you talk about the food, sharing with them why you like this food. Oh, I love eating, watermelon on a hot day. It's so refreshing. It's, cucumbers and hummus. That's what I want. I don't want anything heavy and greasy. That's because this is really nice and light. That's perfect for after I get home from a plane trip or whatever. Or you want to share childhood memories of food. Like one memory I have it's actually a story that my dad told me, is that he grew up in another country and in a big family, and they were sort of on the poor side. And he said one day when he was sort of like around middle school age, his friend gave him a grape. It was the first time he ever had a grape. And he held the grape in his mouth for like half the day because he didn't want to waste it. He wanted to savor it. He knew that he would probably not get a grape for a long time after that, because it was kind of a rarity for him. So that story makes me just really appreciate grapes. So, sharing those kinds of stories, whether it's your own story or grandpa's story or something, really helps to connect food to, to your family's history, but also just make a child appreciate food in a different way. You can also talk about how food helps your body. I think especially young kids, they sort of they pick up and remember what you say, and they will parrot it back later on. And so if you're saying like, oh yeah, carrots help your vision, oh, fish makes you smarter, all these things, then they will internalize that. And again, you're kind of brainwashing them, but it's sort of in a good way, hopefully. And I think if you don't brainwash them, somebody will. So it's better if it's you. But beyond just talking about food in that way, I think that for some picky eaters, you need to go the extra step and really market healthy foods to your kids. You need to borrow techniques from commercial advertising, basically. And they've done studies, actually many studies about school lunchtime. And they showed that if they have a banner with superheroes made from vegetables, and then they call the vegetables something funny, like X-ray vision carrots and crazy broccoli and things like that, that the number of kids who got a serving of vegetables went up by 100 to 200%. So double or more, just from that alone. And then if you add to that, they showed a short video of these vegetable heroes, doing something, then it went up even more. So kids are, unfortunately, for better or for worse, are very influenced by advertising. And probably we all are, to be honest. But why don't we utilize that? We know that's kind of a vulnerability, but can we turn that into actually something that's positive? Can we get celebrity endorsement? You know, if Taylor Swift came out and said she loves kale and loves cabbage, then probably most teenage girls would be getting enough vegetables every day. If we had, you know, more YouTubers and TikTokers and you know, social media influencers doing things like that, you know, rather than showing all these cheat days where they eat 100 slices of pizza and a bunch of chocolate chip cookies, they need to show like the healthy days, right? So, you know, just think if broccoli, kale, and cabbage had the same corporate backing and funding, then how much healthier would we be eating? So this is just a sample. You know, it's like if we use something like this, The Rock daily diet, and he's, you know, he eats cod and eggs and oatmeal and veg and sweet potato, and you know, so like this is what we need rather than his you know, Instagram of like his cheat day with 100 donuts and stuff. Okay. All right. So, and then last is we do still need some practical day-to-day techniques, right? We need, these are kind of, I think of these as like, these are how you get your foot in the door. You need this global mindset. You need this global approach to create the right environment, the right language, to influence a child over time, influence how they think about food. But sometimes for many picky eaters, you also need little techniques to just get something in the door. You know, that might be a new food that's cooked in a very familiar way, or a favorite dish that has some additions or substitutions. Like our chef here, Chef Jess, she prepared some really awesome snacks here, including like, I think black bean brownies and some veggie tater tots. So those are exactly what, you know, where they look familiar, they look like the item that kids love and enjoy, but they also have a healthy component to it. A lot of times if we're asking a child to try something or watching them try something, we can let them try in very tiny taste amounts. Actually, gradual, repetitive is better. And if they refuse it, you know, all of these studies say that you need to let them try something at least 10 to 20 times before they might take to it. Sometimes your timing and your scheduling and planning can make a big difference too. So you don't want to give a lot of snacks and high calorie drinks before meals, because that will kill their appetite for the healthy food at the meal. Instead, you want to plan ahead so that, like, okay, after soccer practice, they're super hot and sweaty. Soon as they get in the car, you don't give them a Gatorade and, you know, and chips. You give them like, okay, I cut fresh apple slices for you. I have strawberries for you. I have, you know, and ice cold water, you know, so then that becomes like, oh, this is so refreshing. This is what's normal, right? Or even just after school. That's often when kids are like super hungry. That's when they're most likely to want to eat whatever is there. And if that's something healthy that you've prepared, then that's, you know, that's a parenting win there. And then you can also kind of hide or blend, mix healthy foods into things. And I think soups and stews, actually some, you know, things with like pasta sauce, fried rice, all these dishes, there's a lot of things that we can do. And there's a lot of like health restaurants that actually do very creative things. But I think these are also techniques that can be helpful. These are not long-term strategies. They're not changing how the child thinks necessarily, but they help to just get your foot in the door so they start to eat something and start to realize that, oh, okay, this is actually pretty yummy. Okay, so in summary, your child is not actually a picky eater. It's just that they're learning about food. They still need to learn about food in the family's food culture. And you know, so we just need to change our mindset and our approach so that they can kind of follow that influence. And we have to think about, you know, what culture are we setting up when every kid's party always has to have cake and ice cream, you know, and that's the center. And every birthday party, it's always pizza and chicken nuggets, or dino nuggets, actually. You know, it's kind of like, you know, what is the food we're craving, or what do we say? Oh, you know, like let's go out and eat and get ice cream. But that's really telling our child that, hey, that's a food that we really highly value. And not that we can't value ice cream, but we need to start valuing these other healthy foods, or at least showing it more. So again, just in summary, the strategies to promote your child's food learning are keeping eating times positive, making it funnest part of the day is dinner time or meal time. Creating a family culture where everyone's part of a team, you're modeling core eating values like adventurous eating, healthy eating. You're teaching about food away from the table where there's no pressure. And then you're using kind of your child eyes or child glasses to try to make food interesting from a child's perspective with shapes and colors and how you deconstruct it or how you construct it. And then essentially we actually want to brainwash our child just with healthy ideas about food and use some practical tips along the way to get our foot in the door for them to start those. Okay, so I think the overall message here though is that really we can't directly change our children, but we can change our home setting. We can change our family culture and how we talk about food. We can change our parenting approach when we change our own mindset so we don't label them as a picky eater. And that environment is how we're going to influence a child's development. So yeah, and then there's a bunch of references, but thank you for listening. And the picture there, that's parsnips, in case you didn't know what parsnips look like. The white carrot-like thing, that's parsnips. Okay. So yeah, now we'll open it to questions.
Well, thank you, Dr. Lee, for such a comprehensive and thorough and insightful presentation on picky eating and just knowing about a lot of the factors that can affect picky eater, and it's just not picky eating. And I'm sure families and parents will really appreciate some of your really helpful strategies and tips today from your presentation. So we're now going to open up this time for the audience to take on questions. And for the virtual audience, I just want to remind you, you can use our Q&A feature. We'll try to get through as many questions as we can tonight.
So my son right now, he's dealing with a little bit of constipation. Right, he's part of the reason why he's here is he's going through a picky eating phase and not getting probably as much fiber as he should. Do you know specifically what like the dietary allowance of fiber is for a toddler usually? Or is it the same as an adult, or does it need to be modified down?
Yeah, so if you look up the daily recommendation, how many grams of fiber, like 10 grams, 12 grams, I think that it's still very under what is probably optimal. Mm-hmm. So I think the Samueli-Institute in particular, Integrative Health Institute, is very much focused on optimal health rather than sort of just treating. So I think it's very hard to have too much fiber.
Okay.
But I know again, it's a difficult challenge. But think of it as if they're still just kind of learning about food, and we need to start to show him that some of these foods that have more fiber are actually really great to eat at certain times throughout the day. That mom and dad, that's their favorite food for these occasions, and then think of creative ways to present that food so that's more kind of fun and attractive. Other questions?
I have a question. So when would it be a point of concern for parents to worry about children if they have been picky eaters for quite some time, and when it's an appropriate time to assess or evaluate for nutrient deficiencies or when to start supplements?
Yeah, I think that it depends on what they're picky about to some extent. So, and then if they have any associated symptoms. So for example, if a child is very picky about eating meat, then I think that iron deficiency and zinc deficiency is probably fairly easy to develop in that setting if they are really refusing most good iron sources. But if they're picky about green vegetables, but they do eat a few others and they eat fruit, then they may be getting fairly adequate amounts of fiber. Obviously, it's not as diverse as we would like, but but we probably have to worry less about any kind of nutrient deficiency testing in that scenario. And the length of time, I think, also matters, but it kind of matters too, like what is their, so if a child is developing normally, their weight and growth is totally on track, and their energy level is fine, they're active, and they have some picky eating habits, then I'm less inclined to want to test in that scenario. Whereas a child who's underweight, or their BMI is lower, like 5th percentile or lower, and they don't tend to be very active, or they had some mild developmental concerns, then I'd probably be more likely to check lab tests or check for nutrition deficiency in that.
Okay, we'll go ahead and take some questions from our virtual audience. One of our parents asked, her 10-year-old doesn't like to eat meat, beans, or other traditional protein sources. Is there a protein powder that could be an option?
Yeah, so I think if you use any kind of protein supplement, protein powder, then we have to be very careful that it is a very short-term solution, because I think the way that most people, and especially children, digest protein supplements is definitely different than if you're eating the real food. But I think that if they had a supplement that was made of whey protein, as long as they don't have any dairy issues, or if they had a supplement made of plant protein like chickpea or pea and legume protein, those are pretty safe choices. But anything in excess can cause a problem. So I've actually even had a patient before who we think developed an allergy to peas and legumes because they were supplementing with pea protein in large amounts for a long time.
Sort of. I mean, it's talking about stop eating sweets and stuff. And I worry he'll be using enough calories.
We have a comment from a parent that she advertised the healthy eating habits and talked very bad about sugary drinks and sweets like donuts, but now he stopped eating any kind of carbohydrate sweets, such as cakes and cookies. What would you be your recommendations if they've stopped eating certain food groups too? What are some strategies to allow them to get enough calories and diversity in this diet?
Okay, so if they stopped eating sugary foods like donuts, cupcakes, and treats like that, then I'm actually okay if they don't eat that. I think a child could be totally deficient in that food category and be extremely healthy. There's, and it just kind of goes to show you how much those types of foods are ingrained in our culture that we feel bad when a child doesn't want to eat those. I think that, so I'm fine with that. But if a child is really refusing like a whole category, so carbs is definitely a big topic for a lot of like people interested in nutrition. So if there's like a teenager who's really into health and fitness and they start to cut carbs because they've seen all these YouTube videos and influencers who are on a keto diet and stuff like that, I definitely think that that's not healthy. So I think that it's only in certain cases where a keto type of diet or a non-carb or low-carb diet might be healthy for like an adult, but I think for a child who's still growing and developing, that is particularly problematic. And so I definitely would talk to them that carbs are not the problem. problem is processed carbs or processed starches that, every carb in nature, pretty much, most carbs are made in nature come with a bunch of fiber. But we process it and we remove the fiber so that it's tastier, so it's softer, so it's easier to eat. So wheat is, has a ton of fiber in the husk and protein as well, but we take it away and then we grind it to make wheat flour or white flour, and that's what we make bread and baked products and cookies. Even white rice, which is kind of like a staple in many cultures, is processed to take the husk off so that it's more pleasant to eat than brown rice. So I would talk to that child if they're carb hesitant about healthy carbs, like eating a sweet potato, eating a pumpkin squash. Those have carbs and starch, but they also have plenty of fiber as well as a lot of great antioxidants and other nutrients there. Eating whole grains has fiber and protein as well as carbs and starch. Eating beans and seeds to some extent have, carbs and starch, but they also have other beneficial things. So those are healthy sources of those foods. Yeah, but a low carb or no carb diet for a child, I don't think is healthy, except in very specific situations. There's some seizure disorders where a ketogenic diet is actually recommended and can reduce seizure frequency, but those it's pretty rare conditions. And I honestly think that even for adults, I don't think the keto diet is necessarily the healthiest diet, although some people may find good health on it, but I don't necessarily think it's the healthiest diet for the general population.
We have another question from the virtual audience. Would you recommend letting a child just kind of limit over a period of time their meals if they refuse to eat his meal instead of giving him or her any snacks in between meals?
Okay, yeah, this is a very common question. Like, do you just let them starve until they're hungry enough they'll eat anything, right? And the problem here, there's a couple problems with that. Number one is that some kids they have a very strong will. So they will actually, they will stop gaining weight and they can last a pretty long time. Probably they have more willpower than you. You will probably give in first. But the second thing is that this is what I was talking about, is that the better thing to do is how can we make mealtime enjoyable again so that they are not, feeling so much pressure at every meal. And that means that they do get some familiar foods, that's fine, but you shouldn't, just like you shouldn't label your child a picky eater, you shouldn't make choices based on your child being a picky eater. So you shouldn't only go to restaurants where they have chicken nuggets and mac and cheese. You shouldn't only cook meals throughout the week that your child will eat or tends to eat. You should eat what you think is healthy for the family. Include some familiar foods that they like, foods that you like, foods that your spouse and other family members like, but keep it in rotation so that they are getting some familiar foods, but they're also getting exposed to unfamiliar. And hopefully if we can somehow remove the stress or they're feeling that they're under a microscope and dad or mom is watching every bite. Are they eating it? Are they, sometimes it's like, you might not say anything, but the tension is still there. You have to remove the tension completely. You have to really make mealtime fun. And that's really hard to do because like they were saying in the introduction, we have an instinct to want to feed our kids. And so we sometimes have to let them feed themselves, and that's hard.
Thank you, Dr. Lee.
Thank you. Thank you again for listening. Okay, do I need to stop? Okay.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us today for our Integrator Insider Live community lecture. Our next Integrative Insider Live will be scheduled for January 2026. More information will be sent out through our Integrative Insider monthly emails. And you can also check out our events page and community programs that we hold throughout the year, like Women's Wellness Day, CME conferences, and community cooking classes in the Musalem Nutritional Education Kitchen. You can also subscribe to the Integrative Insider emails at SSIHI.uci.edu. We'll be emailing all registrants the link to the recording and a valuable survey. Please help us improve our community offerings by letting us know what you think. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.